Earth descended into collective grief. The streets that had been filled with celebrating crowds now stood empty. Prime Minister Su Jin addressed the planet, and for the first time in history, a world leader spoke to her people while openly weeping. She didn't try to hide her tears. She didn't try to be strong. She simply told the truth. We acted from fear, and fear turned us into murderers. We have killed millions of innocent beings who were trying to save us. There is no justification. There is no excuse. We can only acknowledge what we have done and try to become worthy of forgiveness we may never receive. The political landscape of Earth shattered. General Wu Jin led a faction that refused to accept full blame. He argued in heated debates that the Council's failure to communicate clearly made them equally responsible. He demanded Earth maintain its military advantage and use it to extract concessions. His supporters, maybe 20% of the population, agreed that humanity's response had been justified, given what they knew at the time. Civilian spokesperson Ara countered from the opposite extreme. She argued that humanity must submit completely to Council justice no matter the cost. Her faction believed Earth should disarm entirely, pay any reparations demanded, and accept whatever punishment the Council deemed appropriate. They saw no path to redemption that didn't involve complete surrender. Most people fell somewhere between these extremes, lost in shame and uncertainty. Hyunwoo stopped going to work. He sat in his apartment, unable to look at his daughter without thinking about the children who had died because of what his species had done. How could he teach her right from wrong when humanity had committed such evil? Captain Daeho prepared himself for execution. He had led the assault on the Council headquarters. He had given the orders that killed thousands. In his mind, he deserved nothing less than death. When Ambassador Tae-young visited him the night before the tribunal, both men sat in silence for an hour. There were no words adequate to their shame, but the tribunal didn't demand execution. The Council's response was more complex than simple punishment. High Arbiter Velthun explained that vengeance wouldn't heal the wounds. Justice needed to serve the living, not just punish the guilty. The Council proposed something different. Transformation. Admiral Kyung-soo authorized reparations that would devastate Earth's economy for generations. 40% of Earth's economic output would go to rebuilding the damaged Council worlds. Human engineers, doctors, teachers, and workers would serve on those worlds, helping to repair what had been destroyed. The Shadow Protocol weapons would be dismantled under Council supervision. Director Bora watched as her life's work was taken apart. The stealth dreadnoughts, the AI weapons, the quantum disruption bombs, all of it was being destroyed or converted to peaceful purposes. Part of her felt relief. These weapons had been a burden she never wanted. But she also understood this was punishment. Her brilliant career would be remembered only for the deaths it had enabled. Then engineer Jae-sung made a proposal that shocked everyone. He offered to share the Cascade drive technology with the Council, the most advanced human invention. The weapon that had made their devastating attack possible would be given freely. Not as a weapon, but as a tool for exploration and emergency response. Instant transportation could save lives during disasters, could help distant worlds in crisis. The Council debated for days. Some members insisted accepting the technology would be rewarding humanity's violence, but others saw the gesture for what it was, an attempt to transform something terrible into something good. Eventually they accepted. Dr. Hana and Dr. Sang-woo established the Joint Soul Observatory, staffed equally by human and Council scientists. Their first discovery was remarkable. The technique the Council had developed to stabilize Earth's sun could be adapted to extend the lifespan of dying stars across the galaxy. The emergency procedure that had triggered a war might now save countless civilizations. Young Mai found her purpose in establishing the Galactic Translation Commission. She would spend the rest of her life ensuring that what happened to Earth could never happen again. Every communication between species would go through multiple redundancy systems. Cultural liaisons would verify meaning beyond simple word translation. The catastrophic failure that had killed millions would become impossible, but young Mi carried the weight of what she had done. She had been efficient, precise, perfect in her role as communications officer. Her coordination had helped the human fleet kill millions. She would never forgive herself, even as she worked to prevent future tragedies. Healer Cathra arrived on Earth 6 months after the war ended. She came to help establish medical exchange programs between humanity and the Council species. When reporters asked why she would help the people who had killed her family, her answer was simple and devastating. My husband and children are dead. Nothing I do will bring them back. I can choose to hate or I can choose to heal. Hate is easier, but healing is necessary. Cathra worked alongside human doctors, teaching them council medical techniques and learning human practices. She never pretended the pain wasn't real. She never claimed to have forgiven humanity. But she chose to work toward a future where such tragedies wouldn't repeat. Her quiet grace became a symbol across the galaxy. Not everyone was capable of such strength. On council worlds, there were species who refused any contact with humans. They saw humanity as fundamentally violent and untrustworthy. When human reparation workers arrived on these worlds, they faced hostility and sometimes violence. Some humans were killed by council civilians seeking revenge. The human workers didn't fight back. They accepted that some wounds might never heal. General Wu Jin's faction grew more extreme. They insisted humanity was showing dangerous weakness. They argued that accepting blame and paying reparations was surrender, that Earth should instead leverage its military capabilities to ensure better treatment. When Wu Jin tried to access the remaining human defense fleet, Admiral Kyung-soo had him arrested for incitement. The trial divided Earth further. Ambassador Tae-young found an unexpected path forward. He had been destroyed by guilt, unable to function for months, but slowly, he realized his experience could serve a purpose. He began traveling to frontier regions where the Council was making first contact with new civilizations. He taught the protocols that had been developed after the catastrophe. His message was always the same. I started a war because I didn't understand. I killed millions because I acted from fear instead of seeking clarity. Learn from my failure. Listen first. Verify always. And remember that fear makes monsters of us all. Director Bora transformed the Shadow Protocol Division into something new. The Transparency Initiative. Humanity would maintain no secret military programs. All defense research would be open to council inspection. It was uncomfortable and sometimes dangerous, but Bora understood that trust had to be earned through vulnerability. The species that had hidden weapons for a century would now hide nothing. The work was slow and painful. Human engineers labored on council worlds, often facing hatred from the people they were trying to help. Human diplomats worked to rebuild relationships that might never fully recover. Human scientists collaborated with species who remembered what humanity had done. Every day was a struggle. Every small success felt inadequate against the weight of what had been lost. Prime Minister Su Jin visited the memorial sites on each attacked world. She met with survivors, listened to their stories, heard their pain. She didn't make excuses. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply bore witness to the suffering humanity had caused. Some people screamed at her, some spat. One elderly council member simply looked at her and said, "My grandchildren are dead because of you." Su Jin could only whisper, "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Admiral Kyung-soo retired from military service. He spent his remaining years visiting the damaged worlds, meeting with families of the dead. He listened to their anger, their grief, their questions about why. He had no good answers. He had acted to save Earth and in doing so had nearly destroyed everything. The hero of humanity was its greatest shame. Captain Daeho received an unexpected appointment. The Council named him commander of the newly formed Joint Peacekeeping Force. The species he had attacked wanted him to help prevent future conflicts. Daeho accepted, understanding it was both honor and punishment. He would spend the rest of his life trying to prevent others from repeating his mistakes. 10 years had passed since what was now called the Sun Guard crisis. The name had been chosen by a joint committee of humans and council members, deliberately neutral, neither glorifying nor condemning either side. It was a name that acknowledged pain while pointing toward healing. Earth had changed in ways both visible and subtle. The celebration monuments from those first terrible days had been torn down, replaced by memorial gardens that honored both human and council dead equally. In cities across the planet, mixed species communities had begun to form as council members came to work on collaborative projects and chose to stay. Cadet Minseo represented something new, the generation born after the crisis. She was 20 years old, had grown up learning the full truth of what her species had done and had chosen to serve anyway, not in pride but in determination that it never happen again. She served aboard the peacekeeping vessel Reconciliation, where her commanding officer was a council member and half her crewmates were non-human. During training, Min Seo had visited the memorial sites. She had seen the destruction humanity had caused. She had met survivors who still carried physical and emotional scars. One elderly council female had asked her why she wanted to serve. Min Seo had answered honestly, "Because my species did something terrible. I can't undo it, but I can spend my life making sure it never happens again." Captain Daeho commanded the joint peacekeeping force from a station orbiting a neutral world. His hair had gone gray, and his face carried lines of stress and sorrow that would never fade. But he had found a fragile peace in his work. The species humanity had attacked had trusted him to help prevent future conflicts. He took that trust seriously, knowing he could never fully earn it but could spend his life trying. The force he commanded was unlike any military organization in galactic history. Mixed species crews shared command structures, complete transparency in operations. It was inefficient by traditional military standards, but that was the point. The goal wasn't maximum combat effectiveness. It was building relationships that made combat unnecessary. Young Mi served as the director of the Galactic Translation Commission. Her office was in the Council headquarters, rebuilt and expanded in the years since the war. The station was now home to the most sophisticated communication systems in the galaxy. Multiple redundancy protocols, cultural liaisons for every known language, real-time verification systems, and fail-safes that would shut down any operation where meaning wasn't completely clear. The catastrophic failure that had started the war was now impossible. But young Mi still woke up some nights in a cold sweat, remembering the efficiency with which she had coordinated the attacks. The people she had helped kill would haunt her until her last breath. The work she did now felt like building a monument from bones. Dr. Hana shared the Galactic Science Prize with Counselor Mirith for their development of stellar stabilization technology. The technique that had been used to save Earth's sun had now preserved 19 other stars across the galaxy. Civilizations that would have died in stellar catastrophes continued to thrive. The emergency procedure that had triggered a war had become one of the galaxy's most important scientific breakthroughs. At the award ceremony, Dr. Hana had broken down crying during her speech. "We nearly destroyed everything because we didn't understand. This prize feels like it's built on graves. I accept it not as an honor but as a reminder. Science without communication is dangerous. Knowledge without wisdom is deadly." Admiral Kyung-soo had died 2 years ago. He had spent his final decade visiting the damaged worlds, meeting with survivors, listening to their pain. His memorial on Earth was simple, a stone with his name and the words, "He tried to make it right." On 3 council worlds, similar memorials stood, erected by families of the dead who had come to respect his genuine remorse. Director Bora now led the Transparency Initiative, an organization that maintained complete openness about all human military capabilities. Council observers had full access to every human defense installation. All research was shared. All weapons development was joint projects with Council oversight. Some humans considered this dangerous. Bora considered it necessary. Trust wasn't built by hiding strength. It was built by showing you wouldn't abuse it. Engineer Jae Sung had modified the Cascade drive for peaceful purposes. The technology now powered emergency response systems across the galaxy. When disasters struck distant worlds, aid could arrive instantly. The weapon that had nearly destroyed civilization had become its safety net. Jae Sung had refused all honors, insisting he was simply trying to transform something terrible into something useful. Healer Kathra had returned to her homeworld, but maintained close ties with human medical institutions. She trained human doctors in council techniques and taught council healers human practices. She never claimed to have forgiven humanity for her family's death, but she had chosen to work toward a future where such losses might be prevented. Her example had inspired others on both sides to seek healing rather than revenge. Civilian Hyunwoo now worked as a teacher, educating young humans about the crisis. He didn't sugarcoat the truth. His students learned about the fear that drove humanity to violence. They learned about the council members who had been trying to save Earth. They learned about the millions who died because of miscommunication and hasty action. Most importantly, they learned that good intentions weren't enough. You had to verify. You had to listen. You had to pause before acting. Ambassador Taeyang had become one of the most important figures in galactic diplomacy. His work on first contact protocols had probably prevented 3 other potential conflicts. His message never changed. Fear was natural, but acting from fear without verification was catastrophic. He carried the guilt of starting the war, but he had transformed that guilt into wisdom that saved others. General Wu Jin had died in prison, still insisting humanity had been right to defend itself. A small portion of the human population still agreed with him, still believed Earth had shown weakness by accepting responsibility. But they were a minority, and their children were growing up in a different world. Prime Minister Su Jin stood before the memorial gardens on Earth, preparing for the 10-year commemoration. The gardens were beautiful, planted with species from every attacked world. Human and Council civilians worked together to maintain them. It was a living symbol of what had been lost and what was being built. High Arbiter Velthun arrived for the ceremony, along with representatives from all 47 Council species. The gathering was somber. There were no celebrations, no triumphant speeches, just acknowledgement of pain and continuing commitment to healing. Historian Jiwoo had completed his comprehensive account of the crisis. The book, required reading across the galaxy, refused to sanitize anything. It showed humanity's fear and the Council's failure to communicate. It detailed the deaths, the destruction, the shame, but it also showed the work of healing, the slow building of trust, the transformation of weapons into tools for good. The final chapter asked a question: can good people do terrible things? Yes, can terrible things lead to growth? Sometimes. Is any of it worth the cost? That's for you to decide. Captain Daeho delivered the memorial speech. He was older now, worn by a decade of service, but his voice was steady. We cannot undo what we did. We cannot bring back the dead. We cannot erase the scars. We acted from fear, and fear made us into monsters. The Council failed to communicate clearly, and we failed to pause before destroying. Both failures were tragic. Both could have been prevented. He paused, looking out at the mixed crowd of humans and Council species. What we became in those terrible months is a warning written in blood. What we've become in the years since is a choice we make every day. We choose to remember. We choose to learn. We choose to do better. The Council betrayed the Sun, except they didn't. Our response was justified, except it wasn't. What a shame we attacked the Council of Humanity, the greatest shame our species has ever known. But shame transformed into action becomes wisdom, and wisdom shared becomes hope. Young Mi listened from the crowd, tears streaming down her face. She would carry the weight of what she had done for the rest of her life. But she could also see the results of a decade of work. The translation systems that would prevent future catastrophes. The mixed species crews learning to trust each other. The children like Min Seo who were growing up in a galaxy trying to be better. Technician Yoon Ji, who had decrypted the truth all those years ago, stood with her family. She thought about the moment she had realized what the data meant, how the celebration had turned to horror, how the world had changed in an instant. She wondered sometimes if it would have been better not to know, to live in the lie that humanity had been heroes. But no, the truth, however painful, was necessary. Dr. Sang-woo placed flowers at the memorial, reading the names of Council civilians who had died. There were too many to read them all, but he read for an hour, giving voice to the lost. Each name was a person with a family, with dreams, with a future that had been stolen by fear and miscommunication. As the ceremony ended, the assembled crowd stood in silence. Then slowly, humans and Council members began to mix, talking quietly. The conversations were sometimes awkward, sometimes painful. Technician Yoonji worked for 72 hours straight to break the encryption on the Council database. Captain Daeho had recovered. She drank coffee until her hands shook, ignored her supervisor's orders to rest, and pushed her computer systems beyond their safety limits. Something about the data felt urgent, important, wrong. When the files finally opened, Yoonji read the first page and felt her stomach drop. She read it again, hoping she had misunderstood. Then she ran to find Dr. Sang-woo, the xenolinguistics expert, because she needed someone to tell her she was interpreting this incorrectly. Dr. Sang-woo read the documents with Dr. Hana looking over his shoulder. His face went pale. Hana started crying. Within an hour, they had called an emergency meeting with Admiral Kyung-soo and every senior commander. What they presented made grown soldiers weep. The Council hadn't been attacking Earth. They had been trying to save it. The documents detailed something called solar resonance cascade. It was a phenomenon that occurred in stars of very specific types at very specific ages, with very specific energy signatures. When these conditions aligned, the star would undergo a chain reaction that resulted in a supernova-level explosion, not in millions of years, in months. Dr. Hana found herself explaining astrophysics to men and women who looked like they wanted to die. The Council's sensors had detected the early warning signs in Earth's sun 18 months ago. They had seen this before, 14 times in galactic history. 14 civilizations had been consumed by this phenomenon. Each time the warning signs had been subtle, fluctuations that seemed natural. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was too late. The Council had developed a technique to prevent the cascade. It required carefully extracting specific isotopes from the star's core, bleeding off the dangerous resonance before it could trigger. The process looked exactly like what humanity had observed. Massive energy streams flowing from the sun into a dimensional storage facility. But they weren't stealing the sun's energy. They were removing the poison that would have killed it. According to the timeline in the documents, Earth's sun had been approximately 6 months away from the cascade event when the Council began their operation. If they had done nothing, the explosion would have vaporized everything within 10 light years. Earth, Mars, the asteroid colonies, every human space station. Gone in seconds, Dr. Sang-woo found the translation logs. This was where everything had gone wrong. When Ambassador Tae-yang had appeared before the Council demanding answers, the automatic translation system had catastrophically failed. Tae-yang's questions had been rendered as nonsensical gibberish. The Council members had heard something like, "Why perform standard maintenance on astronomical object of no significance?" The High Arbiter's response about necessary procedures and galactic security had been trying to explain that they were following emergency protocols to prevent a stellar explosion that threatened nearby systems. But the translation had turned this into vague bureaucratic language that sounded like an evasion. Counselor Mirith, the bird-like creature who had tried to approach Tae-yang after the meeting, had realized the translation error. She had been trying to explain that there was a communication problem, that Earth was in danger and needed to understand what the Council was doing. But her words had been garbled too. By the time she could arrange a proper translator, humanity had already launched its attack. Director Bo-Ra sat in the briefing room, reading the casualty reports from humanity's assault. Her hands were shaking. 127 million Council civilians dead. 47 world's infrastructure damaged. The Council headquarters station, home to 50,000 staff members and their families, had been evacuated, but dozens of ships had been destroyed in the chaos. Thousands of Council military personnel killed defending installations that were protecting Earth. Admiral Kyung-soo looked at the treaty the Council had signed 3,000 years ago. It pledged the Council to protect all emerging civilizations from stellar phenomena they couldn't detect or prevent themselves. The Council had been honoring an ancient obligation, and humanity had responded by nearly destroying galactic civilization. Captain Daeho had to tell his crew. These soldiers had fought bravely, believing they were saving Earth. Many had died in the battles. Now Daeho had to explain that they had been attacking their rescuers. He watched strong men and women break down sobbing. Young Mi sat at her communication station staring at nothing. She had coordinated the strikes. Her efficient relay of orders had killed millions. Ambassador Tae-yang received the news in his quarters on Earth. He had returned a hero, welcomed by cheering crowds. Now he locked his door and wouldn't come out. His staff heard him crying through the walls. He had started the war. His demands for action, his angry speeches, his calls for humanity to defend itself, all based on a misunderstanding. Civilian Hyun-woo watched the news broadcast with his daughter asleep in his arms. The celebration had ended. The truth was spreading across Earth like a disease. The parties had stopped. The flags had come down. People gathered in shocked silence, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Admiral Kyung-soo made a decision. Full disclosure, every human in the solar system and the colonies would know the complete truth. No sanitized version. No face-saving edits. They would see what they had done and they would live with it. Young Mai broadcast the message across all channels. The complete Council database. The translation logs. The casualty lists. Images from the attacked world showing the destruction humanity had caused. Dr. Hana's analysis confirming that the Council had been saving Earth's sun, not killing it. Everything. The message ended with footage from one Council world, a city that human weapons had struck. Buildings collapsed, fires burning, and in the rubble, rescue workers pulling out survivors. One of them was healer Cathra, a reptilian female whose entire family had died in the attack. She was working alongside human prisoners of war, treating injured civilians. A human soldier had asked why she was helping them after what they'd done. Her response had been recorded, "Because you didn't know, and because someone must choose to stop the cycle of violence. I choose now." The galaxy watched in silence. 47 civilizations waited to see what humanity would do. Some called for justice, some demanded punishment. Some, like healer Cathra, simply waited to see if humans were capable of growth. On Earth, 5 billion people sat with the knowledge of what they had done. The celebrations felt obscene now. They had killed millions while believing they were heroes. The shame was crushing. Some people couldn't handle it and took their own lives. Others became angry, insisting humanity had still been right to defend itself. Most just felt numb. Director Bo-Ra looked at the Shadow Protocol weapons and wanted to destroy them all. These terrible tools had nearly ended galactic civilization, but destroying them wouldn't bring back the dead. Nothing would. Admiral Kyung-Soo addressed Earth one final time. We acted from fear. We didn't verify. We didn't wait. We saw a threat and responded with overwhelming force. And we were wrong. Catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. The question now is, what do we do with this shame? Do we deny it? Do we make excuses? Or do we take responsibility and spend the rest of our existence trying to make this right? Captain Daeho and Ambassador Taeyang volunteered to face a war crimes tribunal. They would accept any punishment the Council deemed appropriate. Director Bo-Ra turned over all Shadow Protocol files. Every secret humanity had hidden. The weapons that had nearly destroyed the galaxy would be revealed completely. But the Council's response surprised everyone. High Arbiter Velthun, speaking through a properly functioning translator this time, made a statement. The Council acknowledged their role in the catastrophe. The translation failure was their responsibility. The decision to proceed without ensuring humanity understood had been arrogance. The galaxy had two choices now. Continue the cycle of violence and pain or find a way forward together. Velthun didn't know which path would be chosen, but he knew the decision would define the next stage of galactic civilization. The broadcast went out on every channel across human space. Admiral Kyung-Soo stood before the cameras, his uniform crisp, his expression hard. Behind him, Director Bo-Ra of the Shadow Protocol Division stood silent and watchful. What they were about to reveal would change everything. Citizens of Earth and the colonies, Kyung-Soo began. For the past 100 years, since first contact with the Galactic Council, humanity has maintained a secret. We hoped we would never need it. We prayed our fears were unfounded. But we never forgot the most important lesson from our own history. Trust must be earned, and power respects only power. Images appeared on screens across human space. Massive warships unlike anything the public had seen. Weapons that bent the laws of physics. Technology that should not exist. The Shadow Protocol had been developing these weapons in secret asteroid facilities, in the dark spaces between stars, in hidden laboratories on remote moons. We are not the primitive species the Council believes us to be, Kyung-Soo continued. We are humanity, and we do not go quietly into extinction. Director Bo-Ra stepped forward. Her voice was cold and precise as she explained what was about to happen. Humanity had 40 stealth dreadnoughts, built in secret over decades. They had artificial intelligence weapons banned by Council law. They had genetic targeting systems, quantum disruption bombs, and most importantly, they had engineer Jae-Sung's Cascade Drive. Jae-Sung appeared on screen, a quiet man in his 50s who looked more like a university professor than a weapons designer. He explained his invention simply. The Cascade Drive didn't move through space. It created temporary tiers in reality itself, allowing ships to step from one location to another instantly. No travel time, no warning, just instant arrival. The plan was devastating in its scope. 23 simultaneous strikes on the most critical Council worlds. Not civilian targets, Bo-Ra emphasized. Military installations, communication arrays, power generation facilities, and government centers. The goal was not genocide. The goal was chaos. Force the Council to divert all resources from the sun-draining operation to deal with the crisis humanity was about to create. Captain Deho received his orders aboard the Indomitable. He would lead the assault on the Council headquarters station itself. His hands were steady as he read the mission parameters, but his heart was heavy. Everything he had believed about humanity's place in the galaxy was collapsing. They were about to become the villains in someone else's story. Civilian Hyan Wu watched the broadcast from his apartment in Seoul. Like millions of others, he felt torn between hope and horror. Yes, Earth was dying. Yes, the Council had betrayed them, but war? Against 47 civilizations? It seemed insane. Yet what choice did they have? He thought of his daughter, only 6 years old, and realized he would do anything to give her a future. Even this, the attack began at midnight, Earth Standard Time. 40 warships vanished from their hidden positions and reappeared in orbit around 23 Council worlds. For 3 seconds, there was no response. The Council defense systems hadn't even registered the intrusion. Then humanity opened fire. The weapons Director Bora had developed were terrible in their efficiency. Quantum disruption bombs that collapsed force fields from the inside out. AI swarms that infected computer systems and turned the Council's own weapons against them. Kinetic missiles that moved too fast for point defense systems to track. Each human ship carried enough firepower to cripple a planet's entire military infrastructure. Young Mi monitored communications from her station as the Indomitable dropped out of the Cascade field. Directly above the Council headquarters, she had expected defensive fire, had braced for the violent shake of weapons impacts. Instead, there was confusion. Council transmissions filled with questions and panic. They kept asking what was happening, why humanity was attacking. They didn't sound like beings who had just tried to commit genocide. But there was no time to think about that. Deho had his orders. The Indomitable and 5 other warships unleashed a coordinated strike on the station's shield generators. Within minutes, the shields collapsed. Human boarding teams used personal Cascade devices to teleport directly into key areas of the station. The Council security forces, armed with standard energy weapons, were overwhelmed by humans in powered armor carrying weapons that violated every galactic treaty. On the planet below, High Arbiter Velthun received the reports with growing disbelief. 23 worlds under attack simultaneously. Human weapons operating at technological levels that shouldn't be possible. And worst of all, the attacks were working. In less than an hour, humanity had destroyed more Council military assets than had been lost in the last 1,000 years of galactic peace. Velthun activated the emergency protocols, calling up reserve fleets from across Council space. But Bora had anticipated this. Human ships were already in position near major fleet bases. As Council warships began to mobilize, they found human vessels waiting. The battles were brief and brutal. Humanity was outnumbered 50-1, but their technology was centuries ahead in practical application. The Council had grown complacent during the long peace. Humanity had spent a century preparing for this exact scenario. Engineer Jae Sung coordinated the Cascade Drive operations from Earth. Every 3 minutes, human ships would vanish from one combat zone and appear in another, hitting targets and disappearing before the Council could respond. It was guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale. The Council's vast numerical advantage meant nothing when they couldn't pin down their enemy. After 6 days of continuous combat, the Council's military command structure was in chaos. Communication networks were damaged. Supply lines were disrupted. Military leadership was scattered and unable to coordinate. And critically, the sun-draining operation had been abandoned. The operators had been evacuated when human forces attacked nearby Council facilities. Dr. Hana confirmed it from the Sol Observatory Station. The streams of matter flowing from the sun had stopped. The dimensional portals had closed. Within hours, the sun's output began to stabilize. Temperature readings on Earth stopped falling. It would take weeks for the climate to recover, but the immediate crisis was over. Earth erupted in celebration. Humanity had done the impossible. They had forced the Galactic Council to back down. They had saved their world. People danced in the streets. Flags waved from every building. Admiral Kyung-soo was being hailed as the greatest military commander in human history. But aboard the Indomitable, Captain Deho stared at a data device recovered from the Council headquarters station. Young Mi had given it to him an hour ago. She had been trying to break the encryption when she noticed something strange. The files weren't written in Council standard. They were written in an older format, one that required different translation algorithms. Daeho had run the files through every system on the ship. What he found made his blood run cold. He read the documents 3 times, hoping he had misunderstood. But the meaning was clear. Horribly, terribly clear. He opened a secure channel to Admiral Kyung-soo on Earth. The Admiral answered immediately, still surrounded by celebrating officers. Daeho's face on the screen made Kyung-soo's smile fade. "Admiral," Daeho said quietly, "we need to talk. Right now. Because I think we just made the worst mistake in human history." The alarm system screamed across every monitoring station in the solar system. Dr. Hana stood frozen in front of her display screen, her coffee mug slipping from her fingers and shattering on the floor. The numbers made no sense. They couldn't be real. But every sensor, every instrument, every backup system told the same impossible story. The sun was dying, not slowly, across billions of years as nature intended. The star that had warmed Earth for 4.5 billion years was dimming at a rate that defied every law of physics Hana understood. She ran the calculations 3 times, hoping for an error. Each time, the results came back the same. At this rate, Earth had 3 months before the Ice Age began, 18 months before the sun became unstable enough to destroy everything in the inner solar system. Hana activated the emergency communication line to Earth Defense Command. Her hands shook as she transmitted the data. Within an hour, Captain Daeho received orders to take the entire defense fleet to investigate. The indomitable, humanity's largest warship, led 20 other vessels toward the sun. Daeho had served in the fleet for 15 years, but he had never seen his crew this frightened. Young Mi sat at her communication station, monitoring signals from Earth below. The news had leaked despite government efforts to contain it. Panic was spreading across the planet. People were flooding into stores, buying supplies. Governments were activating emergency protocols. Some religious groups proclaimed the end times had arrived. Young Mi wanted to tell them they were wrong, that everything would be fine, but she couldn't lie to herself. As the fleet approached the sun, Daeho ordered all shields to maximum. The heat was intense even at this distance. Then Young Mi gasped. Her sensors had detected something massive hidden in the sun's corona. Something that shouldn't exist. The object was enormous, easily 10 times the size of Earth's moon. It was made of materials the scanners couldn't identify, using technology humanity had never seen. And it was drawing matter directly from the sun through what appeared to be dimensional portals. Massive streams of stellar material flowed into the structure, disappearing into spaces that bent light itself. Daeho ordered his ships to hold position. He transmitted a message on all frequencies, demanding to know who had built the installation and why. For 3 hours, there was no response. Then a signal came back, encoded in the standard Galactic Council format. The message was brief and cold. Installation operating under Council authority. Human vessels will maintain distance. This matter does not concern Earth. Young Mi translated the message for Daeho. The captain's face went pale. The Galactic Council. Humanity had been members for 200 years, always trying to prove themselves worthy partners to the older civilizations. Earth had followed every rule, paid every required tribute, sent their best and brightest to serve in Council institutions. And now the Council was killing their son. Ambassador Tai Yang received the emergency transmission at the Council headquarters, a massive station orbiting the capital world. He immediately requested an emergency session. It took 2 days for the Council to agree to meet. 2 days while Earth's temperatures dropped another degree. When Tai Yang finally stood before the assembled representatives of 47 civilizations, he could barely control his rage. He presented the evidence. The data from Dr. Hana's instruments, the images from Captain Daeho's fleet, the undeniable proof that someone was draining Earth's sun. Tai Yang demanded answers. He demanded the operation cease immediately. He demanded an explanation for why the Council would condemn 5 billion humans to death. The High Arbiter Velthun, an insectoid creature 3 meters tall, listened without expression. When Tai Yang finished speaking, Velthun conferred with other Council members in languages the translation system struggled to process. Finally, the High Arbiter spoke. The words that came through the translator made little sense. Something about necessary procedures and galactic security measures and acceptable parameters. When Tai Yang pressed for clearer answers, Velthun simply stated that the operation would continue as planned. Taeyang couldn't believe what he was hearing. He demanded a vote. He demanded intervention. He quoted the Council Charter, the agreements that promised protection for all member species. The other Council members exchanged glances. Some seemed confused. Others appeared uncomfortable. But none spoke in Earth's defense. One member, a bird-like creature named Counselor Mireth, attempted to approach Taeyang as the session ended. She seemed agitated, trying to communicate something urgent. But the translation system garbled her words into nonsense. Security personnel ushered everyone out before Mireth could try again. Back on the Indomitable, Dr. Hana transmitted updated calculations. The situation was deteriorating faster than predicted. Earth's average temperature had dropped 2 degrees in just 1 week. Weather patterns were collapsing. Crops were failing. The southern hemisphere was experiencing unprecedented snowfall. Captain Daeho considered his options.
He had 20 ships.
The Council installation had defensive systems he could see, and probably dozens more he couldn't. If he attacked, his fleet would be destroyed, and it wouldn't even slow down whatever the Council was doing. He felt helpless. His entire life had been spent preparing to defend Earth, and now he couldn't do anything. Young Mi received a personal message from Ambassador Taeyang. It was brief, sent on a secure channel. The Council has refused to stop. They will not explain. They will not negotiate. We have been condemned. Inform command, we have no choice now. We must act or we die. The message was forwarded to Earth Defense Command, to the civilian government, to every military installation on Earth and in the colonies. Within hours, Admiral Kyung-soo called an emergency meeting of the Security Council. Daeho watched the transmission from the Indomitable. The Admiral's face was grave as he spoke. For 200 years, we've trusted the Galactic Council. We've believed we were part of a community of civilized species. Today, that trust has been betrayed. The Council is killing our sun. They refuse to stop. They refuse to explain. We have 3 months before Earth becomes uninhabitable, 18 months before our entire species dies. Admiral Kyung-soo paused, letting the words sink in. We have one option remaining. The Shadow Protocol. We activate it now or we accept extinction. Across the solar system, humanity held its breath. They had no idea what the Shadow Protocol was, but they were about to find out. And so was the Galactic Council.